So over the last couple of days, we learned that the UFC is going to be bringing back the Ultimate Fighter for its 32nd season in 2024 to a little bit of a mixed reaction. A lot of fans probably have moved on from the idea of the Ultimate Fighter because, let's be real, Dana White's Contender Series is a much easier method of scouting fighters and building stars. But on the other hand, the UFC was founded on the Ultimate Fighter, so I would be sad to see it go, even though I don't really pay as much attention to it as I did in the past. But in this video, I'm going to be predicting who I think that the coaches could be for the Ultimate Fighter Season 32, and I have some outrageous ideas, but I've also got some very realistic ideas, and I'm going to be going over them in this video. But before I do get into who I think could be the coaches, I've got to go over a little bit of a criteria that I've just come up with there. It's going to start in June, and typically we either don't see the fighters fight until after the show has completely aired, or they don't fight at all. So what I'm thinking is fighters that already have fights booked for before June or around the period of June to August-ish will not be very likely to be coaches of the season. And also, there's just a lot of fighters that probably don't necessarily meet the criteria because they've got to be pretty popular in the first place. So it does narrow it down quite a bit. And the first idea that I had at first, I thought this was outrageous, but after I think about it a bit more, it actually does make sense. And this might actually upset a lot of fans if this was going to be the headliner of the Ultimate Fighter 32, but I think it does make a lot of sense, and I think that this one is actually quite likely. My first one is going to be Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic headlining the Ultimate Fighter Season 32, because Jon Jones is out injured. He could be out injured for a very, very long time, and we might not see him fight again until the end of the year, and Stipe Miocic is happy to wait for him. Stipe Miocic doesn't seem super interested in fighting Tom Aspinall for the interim belt, which kind of makes sense. So I think we could see this. I genuinely think we might see Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic headline the Ultimate Fighter Season 32. They're both massive names. It would make already this massive card, this massive fight, even bigger than it already is. And it's Jon Jones. You know, Conor McGregor couldn't really do too much to put the Ultimate Fighter way up in the ratings. Maybe Jon Jones can, but that is an idea that I do have. But I'm hoping that Jon Jones and Miocic fight a little bit sooner so we can have a bit of activity at the top of the heavyweight division, because I think this would upset quite a lot of fans, because at the end of the day, Tom Aspinall is the interim champion at heavyweight. So what are we going to do? We're going to make Tom Aspinall defend his interim title in the meantime. So there's a bit of an iffy one there, but at the end of the day, Jon Jones did get injured, and he probably won't fight for a very long time. They could definitely do the casting and also do the recording of the show around this few month period, starting at the start of next year. I would say they're probably doing this. So while Jon Jones is recovering and Stipe is just waiting around, I think this is the one that makes the most sense. But my next one is a big wild card, and this is a wild card. Now, they don't necessarily have to fight, but two retired fighters does actually make a lot of sense, and I actually think a lot more retired fighters probably should become coaches on the Ultimate Fighter, especially when they are big names like George St. Pierre and Nick Diaz. The reason why I put these two together is there has been a little bit of a rumor that we're going to see George St. Pierre and Nick Diaz fight at UFC 300. Now, I did see that from more than one source actually, but that is actually just a rumor purely. But it did get me thinking that these two could headline the Ultimate Fighter against each other, even if they don't have a fight at the end, because George St. Pierre is the greatest of all time in many people's eyes, and Nick Diaz is a legend of the sport, and although he may not necessarily have that fighting ability that he once had, you can still tell that Nick Diaz does love fighting. And you could even do Nick Diaz and Robbie Lawler as Ultimate Fighter coaches since they're both retired. I do believe that retired fighters does make sense to have as Ultimate Fighter coaches, because as I said, they've got to commit months of time. And, you know, months of time when a fighter's in their prime is just too much for them to commit. So having retired fighters makes sense because it doesn't hold up any divisions, and it just doesn't slow down a fighter that let's say 30 years old and takes away 4 months of their prime when they could have been training and or fighting. So we've got George St. Pierre versus Nick Diaz, a big wild card, but I think this is somewhat realistic as well. I could genuinely see this happening. The next one is another wild card, but we're getting a little bit more on the realistic point. It is Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje doing the Ultimate Fighter against each other. Because let's be real, Justin Gaethje is probably going to be waiting for a title shot, and Dustin Poirier is probably not going to fight Arman Tsarukyan or Mateusz Gamrot. We know that Dustin Poirier is not interested in fighting up-and-coming guys. He's going to try and do all he can to avoid Arman Tsarukyan and try and avoid Mateusz Gamrot, even though I think that Mateusz Gamrot's a pretty winnable matchup for him. We know that Poirier's not interested in fighting the up-and-coming guys. He just wants to hold on to that number 3 ranking I believe he has for as long as possible. So maybe he could do that against Justin Gaethje. Now, once again, I would like to see them fight at the end of the season, but they wouldn't have to. But you could sell a trilogy. You could sell the BMF bout being a trilogy as well on the Ultimate Fighter. Both of these guys, I know Gaethje really wants to get the belt, and I'm sure Dustin Poirier probably does as well. So both of these guys, timeline-wise, it probably doesn't make that much sense, let's be real. But it is something that could be interesting, and it is something that would sell, because both of these guys are big names. If you threw enough money at them, I'm sure Gaethje and Poirier would do the Ultimate Fighter against each other, and it would be an entertaining season for sure. The next one is much less name value, but potentially more realistic with the timeline. I've actually got Dan Hooker and Bobby Green headlining the season. Now, these two headlining the season would, let's be real, be a lot less exciting than Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic, and also Gaethje and Poirier headlining. I do understand that this would be a little bit of a letdown, but I think that this could also be a little bit realistic with the timeline that we're working with right now, because Dan Hooker is getting surgery on his arm. He is injured. And then Bobby Green just got brutally knocked out by Jalen Turner, and I don't want to see Bobby Green make a quick return. So let's just do this. We could do Dan Hooker and Bobby Green be coaches on the Ultimate Fighter. They're both guys that do have time to spare right now. Dan Hooker's got to recover from his arm injury. Bobby Green is going to have to recover from that KO loss. I believe that they both can afford the time right now to put 3-4 months aside. And it would be interesting as well, because Dan Hooker could bring in fighters like Israel Adesanya, maybe Alex Volkanovski, Carlos Ulberg, quite a few guys that the fans know to make the season a little bit more interesting. Eugene Bierman as a coach, I guess, has a little bit of popularity to him as well. So if the City Kickboxing guys could put aside that time, I could definitely see Dan Hooker being a potential coach. And as well as that, I believe Dan Hooker, I don't know if he owns his gym anymore, but he did own a gym at one point, so he does have coaching experience. The next one as well, I think a little bit unrealistic, but possible. Kevin Holland and Michael Venom Page. I don't know if Michael Venom Page would do it, though. I think it would be a big opportunity for him to get his name out there. But at the end of the day, Michael Venom Page is 36 years old, and I just don't see him putting this time aside. But I did think that this was an idea. I really do think that this is a potential idea to see something in the future, because we did see that rumor on the War Room that this is the matchup that the UFC is potentially interested in doing. Kevin Holland and Michael Venom Page, that's an idea for sure. But the thing about MVP is if he signs to the UFC, he's probably going to be wanting to fight ASAP. If MVP signs to the UFC in December, he's probably thinking that he wants to fight in March or April. So who knows? I think that this is a matchup that is intriguing as a fight, but is also very intriguing as an Ultimate Fighter season as well. Kevin Holland would make it fun. So let's move on to my final one. This is actually only one fighter. It's Max Holloway. And the reason why I put Max Holloway here is because at the moment, Max Holloway is actually just waiting on a title shot. That is why he doesn't have a fight booked. That is why he's turned down Aljamain Sterling. It's because he's waiting to see if Ilia Topuria beats Alexander Volkanovski. Because if Ilia Topuria beats Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway is probably going to fight Ilia Topuria next. At the end of the day, he is on a 2-fight win streak, turned back Arnold Allen, who was a very hot prospect, and then finished off Chan Sung Jung in a pretty fun fight. Now, he doesn't deserve a 4th fight against Volkanovski, but he would deserve the title shot if Topuria was to beat Volkanovski. But if Volkanovski does beat Topuria, or even Topuria beats Volk, you could slap Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria as an Ultimate Fighter season. Is it that ideal? Not really, but it's another idea that I had. And I did have a couple of ideas that I did quickly scrap, which I will go through at the end of this video. If we do scroll down, I thought that there was a chance that they could do maybe Alexa Grasso and... Where are they? Sorry. Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko. But they've got a card in Mexico in February, and they're probably going to do Grasso versus someone on that card. Maybe Grasso versus Blanchfield, maybe Grasso versus Fiorot, maybe Grasso versus Shevchenko, and that I believe it would be a trilogy at this point, which kind of makes sense, in Mexico and Mexico City. So I thought that doesn't make sense timeline-wise at all as well, because we need Alexa Grasso to start being a bit more of an active champion, because we've got so many contenders at women's flyweight. And then I was just going through the rankings in general, and I was like, there's no one that makes sense at welterweight unless you wanted to get crazy and do like Ian Gary versus Sean Strickland as an Ultimate Fighter season. I mean, that would be absolutely nuts. I did consider Alex Bahia and Jamal Hill being headliners of a season. That could make sense, but unfortunately Jamal Hill's going through that legal situation, which I won't bring up here. That could have been cool. So, unfortunately, they've kind of missed out on that too. Sean O'Malley could headline a season, but we need Sean O'Malley to be an active champion, because once he beats Chito Vera, he's going to have to defend the belt against Merab, Henry, or Corey. So, or maybe even Song Yadong, if the UFC wants to go that way, with Song Yadong beating Chris Gutierrez. So, who really knows what's going on there? I don't think the flyweights could sell a season. I don't think you could do Islam Makhachev headlining a thing, because we need Islam Makhachev to be an active champion as well. Quite a few contenders deserving. You've got Charlie Olives, but then you've also got Gaethje that's kind of waiting in the wings. Sarukian's kind of waiting for that shot. So there's quite a bit going on. But at the end of the video, I will address as well, it's featherweights and middleweights. I'm thinking of making a prediction video, predicting the roster, or just doing who I would put on the roster if I was to be the talent scout for the show. So I'm thinking of doing that, unless they reveal it before I get round to it, which probably won't be tomorrow. It'll probably be sometime next week, because I've got to do the UFC 296 predictions. But with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't liked the video yet, please like the video. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you guys in the next one.